Hi there. My name is John Stevens, pastor of Zion Lutheran Church in Oregon City, Oregon, and we're part of the ELCA. And welcome to Dollar Store Children's Sermons, where we take a look at the lectionary text. Time to an item from the Dollar Tree. This is for the narrative lectionary, and we've moved past the series on stewardship, and we're looking at Genesis. We're looking at the flood, creation, but more moving into the flood. And so the theme I'm looking at is promise. And in the story of the flood, we get the promise of God, that God gives us the promise, the guarantee that God will not destroy the world again. And that promise is what we're focusing on, because the promise for us as people of God is God promises that God will be our God and we will be God's people. But that covenant and that promise that God makes to us, that God is always making that promise first. So the item I'm using is anything that has a guarantee. Now, for some of you who might play cards, so if you get a bicycle deck, on the bicycle deck, this is from a bicycle deck, but it doesn't have it on here. But if you get a bicycle deck on the jokers, and the joker will have a guarantee that says if this deck has any defects, we guarantee this deck from any defects. If it has something wrong with it, we can send it back and we'll replace it because we guarantee our work. God's promise is more than that. God's promise guarantees love and grace, and God never has to pull back. God always comes to us. That promise that God always is moving forward and moving towards us first. There's all kinds of promises around us that might remind us of that. We see, I'm using a little bit later in another children's sermon, I'm using toothpaste. And in this toothpaste, there's a promise that there's 30% more. And that's a promise that they make when they put that in there. You read in here, it says, contains 30 buttons. The promise for us is that in that package of buttons, there's 30 buttons at least. We see promises all over the place, and we make promises, and we know that we stumble and we fall and we can break our promises. We make promises to God and we stumble and we fall. But God's promise is secure and good and faithful, and God comes to us out of love and grace and says, you are my child, I love you, and my promise is forever. So that's a springboard, using a guarantee card, using a promise we might find on a product, using the promises that we make to one another, and that God is always, that promise that God makes to you and I is good and secure and unfailing. All right, hope you can use that as a springboard for your own thinking. As always, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you have a fantastic week.